Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode number 58 of Discovery Debrief, setting a course for the future of the Final Frontier and discussing Star Trek Discovery, Star Trek Picard, Strange New Worlds, Lower Decks, and who knows what else. I'm co-host Chris Clow, and I am very pleased to welcome every member of our bold panel of Star Trek franchise explorers, including Rachael Clow.
Hey.
Zaki Hasan. Oh, I think Zaki and Cicero are both muted.
Did you mute them?
Hello.
There we go.
I just had to keep you waiting. That's all.
My nails were being bitten. They were. And Cicero Holmes.
Should they have renamed Nemesis What a Mess? Because, yeah.
Oh, okay. So this is interesting. Yeah. So we're not talking about anything specific for this episode. This is just an excuse for us to get back together, full crew complement for the first time in a while, to catch up with you guys and to catch up with what the franchise's news has been doing, and to bring Zaki in on a conversation that we all had the last time we got together about the next Star Trek movie, in addition to a whole bunch of other things. But Cicero and I were texting yesterday, and it was possible, Cicero, that you were going to watch a Star Trek movie here or there. Did you get around to do that?
I am happy to say that first off, shamefully have to say that I had never watched all of the Star Trek films up until this morning, where I completed all of the Star Trek films.
Wow.
I watched them all this morning, but simultaneously on 17 different screens. The two films that were in my foreview and now are in my rear view were the Next Generation films, Insurrection and Nemesis. Right. I am happy that I watched them out of order, because I watched Nemesis first.
Interesting.
And then I watched Insurrection. I only watched Nemesis first because that is the one that is on Paramount Plus. And Insurrection is both on Prime Video and on Hulu, but not on Paramount Plus.
That's so weird.
It is very, very weird. I guess eventually they'll get all that stuff figured out. Disney was really slow to kind of get the Marvel films back into their fold. So I think there's something very similar happening here with Paramount Plus and the Star Trek films. But very many of them are not on Paramount Plus.
Yeah, must be sort of remaining streaming deals. Okay, so before we jump into the movie discussion, sure, on that side of things, and I'm glad that you got to see those. Zaki, welcome back. We are very pleased to have you back. Tell us what you've been up to, man. How have things been going in your life? I know that Star Trek hasn't been a big component of what you've been able to devote your time to of late, but what has the trekking been like for you in that time, whatever limited trek there was, and just what have you been up to?
Oh boy, I'll tell you, it's been an exhausting but exhilarating time, sort of navigating, trying to teach during the pandemic, and that's why Trek has sort of taken a back seat, just because I'm currently teaching 11 classes.
Good Lord.
Which is generally not the recommended dosage of classes, right? But I'm a feast or famine type of person just by nature. So when I'm offered work, I tend to take it, because I'm always I don't know, just my disposition is like, if I say no this time, there might not be a next time, and that's just sort of how I've been. And so in a way, I mean, I can't even complain, because I have no commute, so my classroom is wherever I happen to be sitting, plus my Zoom background. So, there are days where I'm on my bed, there are days where I'm in my closet, there are days, you name it, But it's been a real it's been an instructive time. And one thing I was telling my wife was like, as we're speaking now, restrictions are starting to lift a little bit. There's a sense of sort of being, if not on the other side of it, at least seeing the light. And I was like, we're gonna remember this time, like for the rest of our lives. This will be like a stick pin in time. And so I'm almost like, let's sort of savor this as this part of our experience, draws to a close. And so it has been nice, and not to in any way minimize obviously the real human toll, but I'm very grateful that for myself and my family, we haven't really experienced any hardship during this time. And that's probably what else can you ask for? No one in my family came down with COVID or anything like that. Like, we've all been okay, and I'm so grateful for that.
Absolutely. Very well said. Well, I mean, I can certainly understand the taking in the historical implications of everything that's happened. I mean, the fact that all of us have been alive during this time, someone in the future, including our children or grandchildren, are going to ask us what it was like, right? I mean, that's just the nature of this. I remember walking through a grocery store in Skokie, Illinois, right after things started to get handed down, and I had just started working from home, wearing a mask and thinking that was unusual. And as I was walking out, there was a TV that was playing a news report about how the stock market was crashing again. And for some reason, that moment just stuck out in my mind of, wow, this is history. Look around. There's people that are masked. The world seems to be falling apart. We have a stupid fascist that's leading us. This is a very unusual time in our history, and that's going to be with everybody experiencing this forever. And,
well said.
And thankfully, you can look back on how things were then and how things are now, and there is a notable improvement. And sentiment does appear to be improving, and Washington State is among those that are starting to see restrictions lift. But I think the sentiment is a very welcome one. And for those people who have lost, our hearts, of course, go out to you. But yeah, thankfully, at least in terms of our family, we're fortunate as well. And I'm glad that you two are both with us here today to join us and talk about something that I think we can all escape to and still also kind of aspire to, unless I'm being too optimistic, Rachel.
What? What do you mean?
Well, if I believe Paramount, we'll get into that in a second.
You're not being optimistic. You're being naive.
Oh, okay. All right. See,
well said.
Sometimes those are interchangeable, I guess.
Yes.
So, Zaki, before I hand it back to Cicero, so he has just watched the last two TNG movies. What goes through your head, first of all, when you hear he watched Nemesis first and rounded it off with Insurrection? And also, just how do those movies sit with you now, before I hand it off to you?
How do they sit with me now? Well, I haven't watched Nemesis since 2009, so I think that sort of says a little bit, I guess. I will say, I think Nemesis, I've never been a fan of that movie, but what irked me about it probably more than anything is that up until a year ago, that was the end of the Next Generation's journey. And so I tend to look at Nemesis now sort of like how I look at X3 The Last Stand now. In that, that what pissed me off about that was they were basically like, this is it, this is the end. And I was like, well, that's a shitty ending. And now I look at X3 as like, well, it's like a crappy issue of a decent run. It's like a bump in the road.
What was Claremont smoking? You're right. Yeah.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, and so that's Nemesis to me. It's like, well, it's like a, mediocre to bad episode, but there's still more story to be told. And so I can just sort of take it as that. And I think just in general, I look at the next generation films kind of the same way I look at the TOS films. I'm like, good or bad, it's an opportunity to hang out with my friends,
Sure.
And that makes it go down a little easier.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All right. Well, Cicero, did you know that Insurrection was going to be available elsewhere before you decided to watch Nemesis, or what was it that made you decide to take it in that order? Because you do these broadcast order rewatches. You are just a subversive when it comes to absorbing Star Trek chronologically. So
I really am, and it's completely unintentional.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
So what happened was I happened to be, when we were having the conversation, I happened to have been watching something on Paramount Plus already. So I was like, all right, well, as soon as I finish this thing that I'm almost done with, then, I'll queue up the Star Trek films. And it just so happened that Nemesis was the only one that was available on Paramount Plus. And then I looked to see where Insurrection was, but only after I watched Nemesis. And in fact, I did this almost unintentionally. I knew subliminally that Nemesis was the final film from the TNG crew, but it wasn't at the fore of my mind. So I was just like, oh, here's one of the TNG films. Let me just watch it. And knowing that I had 2 films to watch. And it just so happened that it happened to be Nemesis, and it just so happened to be the lesser of those 2 films.
Very interesting.
And to Zaki's point, I think I didn't come away with it feeling as vengeful, mouth frothy as many people may have been after watching that film, partially because I came out of it with the same outlook that Zaki kind of talked about, which is it was just, it was something bad, but immediately, not to spoil the film, no spoilers for the film, but I knew that things would be reset based on the fact that I had already seen Picard.
Mm-hmm.
And so so the stakes that they planted in that film didn't feel as final.
Sure.
And because they didn't feel as final, I didn't have as visceral a reaction to the events of that film as someone who may have seen it at its release or not long after its release.
It's funny. I mean, I just remember coming out of the theater in December of 2002, almost kind of numb, because I wasn't sure that, for whatever reason, just in the moment, I was not able to fully digest the death of Data. That legitimately shocked me at the time. And then it's only as time has gone on that I just kind of, before Picard came out, that I kind of didn't look at it as such a pivotal happening in comparison to every other adventure we have with him.
I love the fact that I spent a lot of time talking about how I wasn't going to spoil the results of that film. And then you immediately came out and was like, yeah, the death of Data.
The movie did come out almost 19 years ago.
Yeah, I think 2 decades is long enough.
Hey, man, I think I knew that those things happened, but I didn't see them until less than 24 hours ago.
Right. No, but we also have talked about Picard.
Sure.
At length.
Yes, and the results, right.
Yeah,
the thing, having not seen Nemesis and then watching the beginning of Picard, I had a very different feeling. Again, because I'm doing things in such a subversive way, I had a very different emotional take on that opening scene from Picard.
Mm-hmm.
That scene is beautifully shot. It is very poignant. It is all of the things, right?
Mhm.
But what I didn't bring with it was the baggage from Nemesis, where, you know, that excitement of seeing Data alive, presumably,
Mhm.
with Picard playing chess on the Enterprise, right? Like, and, you know, and then obviously, of course, in Picard, it turned out to be a dream, but he was still alive. And then, you know, and then we get a proper death scene with Data, which feels like vindication for anyone who had watched Nemesis.
That still used blue skies, by the way.
Right.
Something
Yes.
that was only connected to Data's end via
Yes.
a film that is largely reviled, which I still
Right.
find very interesting.
But you know what? So there are good things. There were good elements that were in that film, but the film itself wasn't great. You know, and not this is definitely very hyperbole, you know, very hyperbolic, very tongue in cheek, but in similar ways to how I felt about season 3 of Discovery, right? Not to say that I thought season 3 was very good, but I felt like the components of the season were greater than the sum of the season.
Right.
And I feel like Nemesis had good components in it, but you know, ultimately wasn't a good film, wasn't even, you know, a good extended episode of TNG.
Okay, so hold that thought for a second, because I
Right.
want to go to the rest of the panel real fast on something. So, Zaki, when you think back to first absorb, and spoiler alert, I guess, when you think back to the end of Picard and the goodbye that we did end up getting for Data, was that what you were looking for in terms of, well, shit, we were left behind with a movie that I found to be subpar at best, and now you have the second chance to say goodbye to him? With that context, were you satisfied with the way that we did finally say goodbye to Data?
I think so, and I think it comes with the context of this being an actual goodbye, right? I mean, I think Nemesis sort of undermined itself by essentially doing Wrath of Khan and trying to sneak Search for Spock into the last 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
That's the fundamental problem. Is you have there's no window that the movie really gives you to be like, oh my gosh, Data's gone. He's not dead as long as you remember. Like, you know, Wrath of Khan really gives us a whole, you know, an extended farewell to Spock. And when you think about it, if we never saw Spock again after Wrath of Khan, obviously that would be sad, but it would be a beautiful goodbye to the character.
Sure.
And Nemesis didn't do that. And so, and the reason being, Rick Berman was like, oh, and we're going to come back and we're going to do another one. You know, I remember him saying, like, I'm confident that, you know, the movie came out on Friday. He's like, Saturday morning, they're going to call me and ask me to get the next one ready. He was off base on that, right? And so as a result, there was something. It was cheap because there was really no. There's nothing built into Data's farewell other than them putting tracing paper on top of the Wrath of Khan.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with Picard, I mean, we know we're not going to. We may see Brent Spiner again. Obviously, they got you know, Sung cousin number 53, whatever the character's name is. But we're not going to see Data again, and we know that. And so they've engineered it in that way, and it's extraordinary when you think about it. It's these two characters sitting on living room couches, just talking to each other, and it's beautiful, you know.
Yeah.
So short answer, yes.
Maybe next time Rick Berman shouldn't open a movie so close to Two Towers, I'm guessing, or a movie of the stature of Two Towers. Just a thought.
Well, worse than that, it got killed opening weekend by Made in Manhattan starring J-Lo.
That's a good movie. It's a much better
I'm not
movie
saying
than
it's
Nemesis.
good or bad, but I mean, essentially, it's like, you know, it was already roadkill by the time the Two Towers opened.
Sure. Yeah. Well, but you expect Made in Manhattan, a new IP, to maybe not have the same kind of
I
box
think
office
that it was
recognition.
counter programming, thinking that Made in Manhattan and Star Trek Nemesis don't have a whole lot of overlap in their audience.
Right.
Someone who goes to the theater is like, well, go see Star Trek.
What do we
Hey,
want?
maybe Made in Manhattan. We'll just-
Yeah.
What?
The new J-Lo rom-com is out? Oh.
Screw Star Trek.
Yeah, in that case.
Well, Rachel, same question to you, because you have the you probably weren't as, I guess, reviled by the ending of Data in Nemesis, if I were to guess.
I was not.
But did you feel like Picard said goodbye better going into that scene?
Yeah, I think so. It was nice. I mean, I don't think about Nemesis ever.
Right.
I just...
I probably think about it more than anybody else on this panel, but
yeah.
please continue.
I mean, I just don't, like, I didn't like it that much, so I just don't think about it. It's, I don't know, like, it's not a big deal.
Shinzon does not live rent-free in your head.
Yeah, no, it's...
Rachel, don't you know you're doing fandom wrong? If you don't like it, you have to
hold on to your hatred and let it define you.
That's all there is.
Look, I have a real good enlightened feeling about it that I need to adopt this for Game of Thrones because I'm totally bitter about that. But like, it's I just like, so for Data in Picard, it was just very much, it was like sweet and nice on its own, and I liked it on its own, and I didn't feel like it had to make it up for anything in my mind.
Sure.
So I was just happy to see it.
Mm-hmm.
In any case.
All right. Well, Cicero, so coming back to you, because you come at it from a couple of different angles. Not only do you decide to watch Nemesis pretty straight through after having already seen Picard, but you finished TNG as well, didn't you, relatively recently?
Correct.
So how does all of that stuff combine for you? And now that you have also seen the actual end of Data's story, when you come to Nemesis, how does that side of the equation leave you, especially since you've absorbed so much TNG recently?
Well, so I mean, the beginning of the film was so confusing to me because they sit around talking about, like, they spend all this time talking about B4 and as if lore never existed.
Yeah.
Right? Like that whole like, the whole explanation of B4 and their discovery of B4 was so confusing to me that I was trying to figure out this timeline. Like, I just, for whatever reason, I was convinced that this film took place before the show did because of the way that they were talking about B4, as if they had never seen an android that looked like Data before.
The closest that you get to a reference to lore is just Captain Picard saying that Dr. Soong's penchant for whimsical names seems to have no end.
Right. That was, and so that part it was so confusing. And like the only reason I knew it took place after the events of the television show was because Geordi didn't have a visor on. Like that was the only thing. That was like the thing that grounded me
until the next movie you watched.
Right. So like that was the token. Like that was the Inception token that kept me grounded. So was Geordi's eyes.
Sure.
But like. It was just such a weird movie. It was just like the problem with the movie for me. It started with their surprise of who B4 was. Mm-hmm. And then the rest of it, like it just felt incongruent with what it was supposed to be.
Sure.
Which was this celebration of revisiting your friends, as Zaki so accurately described them, revisiting your friends that you've had all of this shared history with, right? And when they present an issue, like, part of the crux of the film is this android that is so unique, that isn't unique because of all the shared history that we have. Like that shows me that the people that are creating this film, that are doing, that are throwing this celebration, aren't really celebrating with you.
Well, and
right?
To kind of piggyback on that, I admire Stuart Baird's work, particularly as an editor. It sounds like he was a huge dick on this movie. He kept calling LeVar Burton Laverne after he was corrected multiple times.
He kept saying, "Hello, Laverne."
Like, what the hell, man? Like, you got a legend on your set, basically, and you're going to disrespect him like that? For God's sake. But also, too, I mean, he didn't know the franchise. Like, he didn't know the franchise from a hole in the wall. In fact, like, I remember watching some behind-the-scenes stuff right after the DVD came out, and he just said, well, we have the set for the scimitar, and it's got a view screen, because, all these bridges have to have view screens. And I was just like, for God's sake, man. This is how you're going to refer to things, just like this one basic visual cue. So it's just like your sense, from my understanding, is absolutely correct. He didn't really know what he was getting into, but also the journeys of the characters, they cut so much stuff out of this movie that would have been better served. So you actually have lines from Wesley that are on the cutting room floor. You have a single line that they cut out that would have cleared up, wait a second, why is Worf back on the Enterprise?
Right.
The last time we saw Worf, he was supposed to be a diplomat for Kronos in the Federation. And there was a line that they cut where he said the life of a diplomat wasn't for me, or something to that effect. And they just cut it out. And it's like a single line would have helped to smooth out those kinds of things and at least give service to the journey that a lot of fans went on with Worf for 4 years on DS9.
But even that, I didn't like that. I don't know. Like that line rubbed me the wrong way.
Oh,
because
sure.
It just felt disrespectful to what Deep Space Nine did with that character.
Very dismissive.
It treated DS9 like a detour instead of something that was far better serving of the character than TNG did.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess DS9 just gets lumped in there because it was kind of a transitionary period between TNG and then Voyager, and since Voyager was the last show before Enterprise, I guess it was just sort of seen as having the baton, even though DS9, for all intents and purposes, I think from this panel's perspective, is the superior series. But
I think what happened to DS9 in the moment was that it was still the black sheep of the franchise.
Yeah.
At that particular point, because it was the show that was anachronistic to everything that Star Trek was supposed to be about, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it was the most not my Trek of the not my Trek people.
Right.
They were, they weren't going off to strange new worlds. They weren't, there were so many reasons not to like DS9, but of course, history proves everyone that DS9 was objectively the best show of all of them.
I feel like this is a good segue to move to Insurrection, because Insurrection as a movie, they never give a star date in that movie, but it takes place in 2375, which for all intents and purposes canonically is the final year of the Dominion War. So after First Contact going into Insurrection, a lot of things have transpired in the Star Trek universe, and these are my key issues with Insurrection. So the war has been going on for years by the point that this movie starts. You have the Federation flagship that's kind of off doing its own thing that seems very disconnected from the fact that there's an interstellar war going on. We have seen Worf not only get married, but lose his wife by the time this movie begins, I'm led to believe, is the form of the chronology. Obviously, we never saw any crew members from the Enterprise at Worf's wedding, which still bothers me, even though I understand the limits of a weekly episodic TV show. But also, too, there's a line in Insurrection and indeed in Deep Space Nine where they establish that the Sona is supplying the Jem'Hadar with Ketracel White.
Right.
And all of these things are happening. So my basic feelings, and I'll go around the panel before I throw it back to you, Cicero, but my basic feelings are that Insurrection is a good movie as an extended TNG episode, and I enjoy it on that basis. But when it comes to intertwining with the universe, it does a piss poor job that it should not have done. And there is a huge opportunity here that is wasted by going with a more typical adventure that has nicer special effects. I like Insurrection as a movie. I think it's probably got some pretty solid humor. I know that's something that people denigrate about it. I still laugh when I watch that movie. I was laughing the other day. But it's when you start to get into the shared universe aspect that so many questions just naturally encumber my brain that it gets in the way of me fully embracing it as a movie. So, Zaki, when it comes to Insurrection, what are your basic thoughts on it and how it interacts with the universe, but also just as a movie on its own?
I think it's easy 20 plus years later to look at it as you say, like, oh, it's just kind of an extended, like a semi-decent two-parter from the show. I don't think it's any worse than, like, what was the, in like season 7, the thing with Worf when he, wasn't that a two-parter? I forget what it was called, when he goes and finds the Klingon colony.
Oh, right.
Oh, yeah.
Where he actually goes to DS9 at first.
Right.
Yeah, and that it's like, all right, it's fine, My problem, the thought I had at the time, and I still feel this way, is there was a kind of hubris in making that movie so average. That's what irked me, because to me, I'm like, you have to treat every at bat like you got to hit a home run, right? So getting on base was not enough. When you think about it. They really hit it out of the park with First Contact. Like Generations was adequate, but you got butts in seats because, oh wow, Kirk and Picard together. That's your marquee. And then First Contact is really like a coming out party for the next generation on the big screen. And then they just kind of whiffed it with this whatever of a story, right? And so there was nothing to sell it other than, hey, here's more of that thing you like. But it's got to be more than that,
Yeah.
And in addition to what you said about the Sona being kind of sketchy, in terms of the mythology of the universe, the other issue I have, and this is something I believe it was Gene Siskel pointed out in his review, he's like, the issue is that the conflict fundamentally doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because you're telling me there wasn't some amicable solution they could arrive at where you say, look, you go on this planet and it makes you youthful. Okay, well, let's figure out a way to share, right? Like the idea that Admiral Anthony Zerbe is going to be like, we have to do like a Trail of Tears here. Like, it's such a bizarre leap, right? Yeah. And there's no next generation context to get there, right? Because when you think about it, he's kind of like Admiral Marcus in Into Darkness, right? In these militaristic and stuff. But like, there's at least some foundation there, right? You say, look, Vulcan got destroyed and it sent the Federation in this direction. Okay, you kind of get there. What in Next Generation leads us to this guy just being just this abject asshole doing that,
Well, and they also they hammer into viewers' heads multiple times in the movie that the Baku village only has 600 people in it, and it's a whole planet.
Zerbe says that, he's like, Jean-Luc, it's only, and you're kind of like, I mean, yeah, like figure out a way to make this work,
Like they didn't even say something like, well, the village is the most potent area for the metaphasic radiation or something like that. They didn't take it that far. It's like, why is a whole planet at stake? Why can't this be a de-aging clinic?
Right.
On one planet? Yeah, I don't know. Well, I think that's very well put, Zach. It just falls apart even more. Rachel, your general thoughts on Insurrection? You've heard me bellyache about it for the last couple of days.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an enjoyable watch experience. You threw it on the other day, and I was enjoying watching it. I did have all the thoughts that you guys were just saying about, like, I'm like, why can't they just share the planet? I really don't. But I don't know. It doesn't bother me.
Sure.
Yeah,
Well,
you have those thoughts, and then I'm like, oh, yeah, but I get to hang out with my friends.
Right. Well, more power to you. I mean, and I just think, like, if the franchise minds of today were in the position of making a Star Trek movie in 1998, we would have gotten a TNG DS9 Dominion War crossover movie. Like,
Right.
That just seems like such a missed opportunity. And I know I'm writing.
It would have been a Star Trek DS9 Dominion War trilogy.
There you go. Probably, yeah. I mean, they would have milked it for longer than just a movie.
You would have gotten the TNG angle. You would have gotten the TNG movie. You would have gotten the DS9 movie, and then you would have gotten their endgame.
I mean, they were so overly worried at this point in time, and honestly, they still are in some respects, of scaring off the newbies, that I'm sure that's what guided it. But anyway, so we went around the world. Cicero, this is the most recent Star Trek movie you have watched. You have absorbed so much of the franchise leading up to this moment. Take it away.
So, and this may be foreshadowing a little bit about our conversation, but when I finished this movie, it made me feel smarter about the things or at least wiser about the things that I had said in our previous episode about what I think the direction for the franchise and its motion picture possibilities, and saying that Paramount Plus should be the home for any feature length Star Trek content, and it should be large extensions of episodes, right? Like, we just, instead of a two-parter, we get a feature-length film that is just kind of, it's in canon, but it kind of sits by itself.
Like El Camino?
Right. But that's how I felt about this film. Like, it was Frakes at his most frakiest, right? Like, I didn't realize that Frakes had signatures. He had a signature style, but as I was watching this film, I was like, this feels like an episode. And not only does it feel like an episode, it feels like a Frakes episode, right? And, now having watched Frakes direct Star Trek and Star Trek adjacent episodes of television on 4 or 5 different series now, I realize now that, like, oh yeah, there's a style to the way that he shoots a film, and I enjoy it for television, and I enjoyed it in Insurrection because it made me feel like television. I don't know that I would have enjoyed it in the movies, right? Like, I don't know that I realized that there is a difference, at least for me, in how I feel about how I view a film sitting in the comfort of my home versus how I critique a film when I have to leave my home and go pay extra money and get concessions and do the whole dance to go see a film in a theater house. But a film like Insurrection shows me that I do, because I don't think that I would have liked Insurrection in the theater. It felt too much like TV, but at home it was perfectly fine.
Interesting. And that really kind of
perfectly
brings in an entirely new way that we absorb media now. right?
Right.
Through home exhibition that did not exist at the time this movie came out.
Right.
So that's an interesting thought. So overall, though, you have generally positive feelings. Like the humor landed with you, and
Yeah. It was so like the Worf's pimple was a little cringy
it's a
at first. But then they came back to it and was like, oh yeah, it plays right. Like that was, but like, yeah, I mean it was a really fun episode. Not again, wasn't the best thing that I've seen that ensemble in.
Sure.
Like, and there have been episodes of TNG that far surpass what, the feelings that I had when I finished Insurrection, but it fell right in line with very good Trek,
Sure.
very good TNG.
Mm-hmm.
Nemesis did not. Nemesis was not on that list, but this film would have fallen closer to Nemesis had I had to go and leave my house and pay money to go see it.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's that, like, I'm really coming to that revelation like now.
Mm-hmm.
And it is kind of shocking to me to be able to say that definitively, but yeah, there's a difference.
I don't think Insurrection gets quite enough credit for rekindling the romance between Riker and Troy. I thought that the movie did a pretty solid job in that side of things, and something that persists through to now. So
yeah, and what's funny about that is because I watched everything in reverse, right? And because while TNG was reversed for me in terms of like where I was with the series, the last bit that I was left off with was them very much being in love and just kind of realizing that where they would be together if the opportunity arises.
Sure.
Like that's very much how it was left. However, in First Contact, they were definitely separated, but my last viewing of them besides TNG was in Picard, where they were married and had kids, had a very loving relationship. So seeing them together in Insurrection and seeing them, married in Nemesis didn't seem weird to me at all. But if I had watched them, if I had watched it in progression, it may have seemed weird. But I like them. I obviously like Troy and Riker together, but I think Frakes likes Troy and Riker together.
Oh, sure.
I think that I think that's really where that push came from. And and for that year,
in terms of poignancy too, when Geordi got his eyes back, I thought that was pretty solid. That. Yeah.
It has a
that
was great awesome. Score, by the way.
Yes.
Beautiful. Like the that entire, I think it's called New Sight or New Vision or something, and it culminates with Geordi looking at the sunrise. It's beautiful music, and even the opening with the village. It's Goldsmith did some great stuff. He's
so smooth, There is such a dividing line between a Goldsmith Star Trek score and everybody. Not that the other scores are bad per se, but
they're just not that.
Right, yeah. I mean, like even Star Trek V, it's my least favorite movie in the franchise, but I got nothing bad to say about his work.
I mean, it's Goldsmith and James Horner and then everyone else.
Right, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, yeah, well said. All right, well, we are running up against the clock a little bit here, but I do want to bring Zaki into a continuation of the last discussion that we had related to the future of Star Trek on film. So, Zaki, you said that you weren't quite familiar with the news item that spawned this conversation. So this was posted at Trek Movie on April 9th, where Paramount officially unveiled that an untitled Star Trek movie has been slotted for a June 9th, 2023 release date, and that J.J. Abrams is going to be producing it. Quick and dirty recap of our conversation is that I felt that because Paramount was publicly declaring this release date as locked for the next Star Trek movie, and that they were giving J.J. Abrams' name out publicly, in spite of the fact that he has such a big deal with Warner Media right now and conceivably is going to be developing DC Comics-based projects in the future, that this was a relatively sure thing, that they have this date. They don't want to say what they're going to be doing, but they probably are further along than they're indicating. Rachael and Cicero very much disagreed with me. That this instead was just a development deal that they don't have shit for, basically, and that they're just throwing the gauntlet down to get people talking publicly about the fact that Abrams is going to be involved with a fourth Star Trek movie under his watch. When you hear that Paramount is throwing a gauntlet down saying June 9th, 2023 is going to have a Star Trek movie in theaters from producer J.J. Abrams, what do you feel like about the future of the franchise? Do you think that there's substance to this, or do you think that, Chris, you're crazy for believing that Paramount had something real to offer in the first place?
There are always possibilities. That's my stock answer. It can't go wrong with that. I think a movie. Let me. I was going to say I think a movie will happen. Let me rephrase. I think Paramount very much wants a movie to happen. So I don't. I think this is more than just putting it out there. I think they want Star Trek to be a multi-appendaged thing. They want it to be for them what Star Wars is for Disney, which is they're doing cartoons and shows and movies and everything's feeding back and forth. They want it to be what Marvel is. Maybe not playing at that level, obviously. So do I think another movie will happen? Yeah. Will it happen on that date? Well, I mean, how many they've been developing something or other since Beyond, right?
Yeah.
So I'm cautious. I have a Spock eyebrow raised about whether they make that date, but I think something is going to happen. I think as far as Abrams' involvement, I wonder if that's not just sort of contractually, like he's got himself a little piece of the franchise now, the same way Michael Bay gets his name on every Star Trek movie, every Transformers movie, even if he has nothing to do with it, like Bumblebee, which he had nothing to do with, but his name is on it. You know, I think I don't think Abrams' presence signals anything. Like, I don't think it means that the Kelvinverse is continuing, nor does it say it's not continuing. I don't think that's enough to say anything. Obviously, I think I've been on record everywhere on this show to random strangers on the street that I very much want the Kelvinverse to continue. So that's what I'm hopeful for. But I don't know. You know, they may just want to do something completely different.
Well, here's the thing that still kind of bothers me, even after we had our conversation about it last time on this show, is that after Beyond came out and people thought about it, what they did, you know, I'm on the record very much liking it and thinking it's probably the best of the three that have come out. But that's certainly not a unanimous opinion from the fan base. But
right.
After Beyond came out and performed the way it performed, which was under not just the studio's expectations, which are always astronomical, but I think just a lot of general observers' expectations. And we've talked on this show even about how the next Star Trek movie probably shouldn't be a summer tentpole. It should probably have a lower budget, and it should maybe lean back on, I don't know, like a November kind of a window.
Yeah.
But when this announcement comes through, Abrams doesn't know how to make a movie for less than $300 million, it seems. They've slotted it at the beginning of the summer movie season. And it seems like they're trying to announce it a couple of years ahead of time. they're really angling this to potentially be a tentpole in 2023. And I think, Cicero, if I'm not mistaken, your contention was that date is too soon. They can't possibly have something at that level, playing at that level, by the summer of 2023, just over 2 years from right now.
Yeah, I do not believe it at all. At all.
I don't think that's necessarily unrealistic. I think you could get there. I mean, it takes some work, but even insofar as budget, I mean, bear in mind, J.J. Abrams directed Super 8 for like $20 and a stick of chewing gum.
Right.
It cost nothing to make. I think it was like $50 million.
Yeah, but
sorry, go ahead.
That was the J.J. Abrams who was like, oh, isn't he the guy who did the Fringe show? Oh yeah,
no. That was after Star Trek. That was after the first Star Trek.
Oh, was really?
Yeah,
was Super 8 after?
He did that between the first two Star Trek movies.
Oh, get out of here!
So he can do it. I mean, and that movie. I mean, I wasn't crazy about it, but it looks great, right?
Well, so is Star Trek the dividing line for Abrams, or is it The Force Awakens?
The Force Awakens is more of a dividing line for Abrams than Star Trek.
You think so?
Yes.
Because
I think he doesn't. I think he doesn't get The Force Awakens without Star Trek, though.
No, that's true, but I don't. I think that he. I guess he doesn't. He can do whatever he wants after The Force Awakens.
His two Star Trek
massively successful.
Yes. There are two very different performers on his Star Trek movies, right? On the ones that he directed. Because 2009 turned everybody's heads, and it was pretty close to being a summer blockbuster. It wasn't quite at the level that a Marvel movie is really at all, but it's still, for the franchise.
They were happy with it. The studio was happy with it.
And Into Darkness did okay, but it didn't do as well as 2009. Yeah. And then 2 years after that, he puts out a movie that makes $2 billion worldwide.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's just because Star Wars is Star Wars, Star Trek is Star Trek. I mean, that's the problem is with the studio, right? So, I mean, if they were to go to JJ and say, listen, we want you to do something that's a little bit more down and dirty, I honestly think, and even if he doesn't direct it, right, I think he's got enough of a rapport with the cast that he could make them be on board with it, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, because that was the issue, right? Because Paramount was like, "Hey, Chris Pine, like, take a salary cut," and he was like, piss off, right? Yeah. Understandably, he's like, "Just pay me what you agreed." I think Abrams could be the guy to be like, "Listen, let's bring this in cheap, and let's all own a piece of the back end, or whatever it takes." And the other thought I had is it's actually been long enough now, since '09 and even since Beyond, that it could work in the movie's favor to bring back this cast, because there is a little bit of like, oh, hey, them again, like they've been gone long enough that we kind of miss them.
Sure.
And the other thing is, when you think about it, there's unlike superhero franchises and like Henry Cavill playing Superman, he's on the clock, right? With these guys, they're not on the clock. I mean, you can play these characters, as has been shown historically, as long as you want. Yeah.
Well, another thing that I didn't introduce into the conversation last time that I think has relevance here, and looking at the landscape at the time that Star Trek Beyond came out with the landscape that we're in today, strictly in terms of Star Trek, it's a night and day difference, right? Because when Beyond came out, no Star Trek on TV, really no seeming hope for a massive expansion of the franchise outside of the fact that this show called Discovery, we think, is going to be coming soon. And CBS and Paramount are, for all intents and purposes, separate entities. Now they're the same entity. Star Trek has a bigger presence on television, or at least in streaming media, which I think still counts, now compared with really at any other point in its history. They're just making more episodic Star Trek material. Does that change the equation for the direction that they decide to go in with the movie? Because clearly Star Trek on Paramount Plus and CBS All Access before it is doing its job since they're making so much additional material. Does that translate at all, or are there still is there still this walled silo between the two? Because another thing that we talked about last week was that Alex Kurtzman said that wall has come down. For all, basically, that's what he said.
Right.
But how does that change the dynamic, if at all, for the creation of a new movie? There's open field. Anybody have any thoughts?
Oh, I want to hear Zaki, because I think Rachel and I both gave our opinions last week about this particular portion of it all.
Well, so Cicero, you said that you felt that feature material should be on the streaming service.
Oh yeah, 100%, 100%. Like this, Insurgent only reinforces that. Oh, Insurrection. Fox News.
Same thing. See, the original title was Prime Directive. That's what they should have gone with. Now Insurrection has a totally different connotation. But anyway.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Zaki,
they should have called it Star Trek Optimus Prime. It probably would have made more money. I'd have wanted to see that. I think the merger for sure increases the odds of movies happening rather than there was a point there where Star Trek was not so much cannibalizing itself but competing with itself, and you had this weird situation where the movies couldn't refer to in terms of the marketing, there was no like synergy, right? And the issue is that now, like, CBS owned the TV rights, Paramount licensed the movie rights. So Paramount was having to split whatever merchandise money they were making, right? And that's not the case. So in other words, there's added cost benefits above and beyond how the movie does at the box office, right? And if you have a situation where the entire franchise is deemed a commodity, it incentivizes them to, and even picking up on what Cicero was saying, like you can have a theatrical release and do the 6-week turnaround where it ends up on Paramount Plus exclusively. Well, suddenly now it's an asset that can potentially play in theaters, but is also driving traffic to the streaming service. So there's, the merger, as much as I'm against like just corporate hegemony, I think in terms of this very narrow franchise, which we all have like an emotional investment in, I think it's good. I think it increases the odds of just more Trek content of all stripes, television and features. I think both are more likely rather than less.
So do you think though that the resurgent Star Trek on television and its conceivable popularity, you never know it looking on Twitter, but the popularity that it seems to be enjoying enough of that Paramount has such confidence in creating new material, does that affect the creative direction that the next movie goes in? Or do you think they just go, no, we already have this established franchise with this cast and these 3 other movies, let's do that?
I certainly think that if they were to stick with the Kelvin cast, the spaceways are clear, right? Because there's nothing on TV that's doing that specific era. I mean, Strange New Worlds will kind of touch up against it, but that's going to be, Anson Mount said it, right? That's going to be episodic Trek.
Yeah. And
in very much in the vein of the original series. Well, what they can do with the movies is do something, not Frakes-ish, more cinematic on like a cinematic scale, slightly bigger scale stories, maybe not as big as the previous ones to spend less, but I mean, it carves out their own little niche, and they can find ways to make all the stuff feed back and forth. I mean, why not? If they can find a way to, I mean, Discovery season 3 finally, and I haven't even watched it, but I know of this, finally like acknowledges the existence of the Kelvinverse.
Yes.
Right. Well, that's kind of a big deal, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I would think so.
So now you can do this. Like, I mean, it's like, in Avengers Endgame, that the inclusion of the butler Jarvis is the first time that those movies acknowledge anything that the Marvel TV shows did.
Right.
And that little thing for me was like, hey, sweet. Suddenly now, you at least by implication, you broaden your canvas. Well, Star Trek has much less, back and forth that they need to do. They can find a way to connect the Kelvin verse and the main timeline in some cool ways. Have like you could do a next generation era crossover of like our prime TNG characters with the Kelvin timeline, and people would show up for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sure. Anyway.
Well, Cicero, Rachel, any final thoughts? You want to slap me across the face one more time, or
Oh no, buddy. Sorry.
It's all right. Wow. No, I had a good time. But no, just
hey now.
But I feel bad.
No,
just crush your dreams.
It's fine.
Right.
It's fine.
I got your back, Chris.
Thank you, Zaki. Yeah, we're me and you against the world.
That's right.
Well, no, I mean,
Thelma and Louise, baby. We're going over the cliff.
Let's go off the cliff. Yeah. But Rachel, for you, just how does this affect any perspective that you have on what the potential 2023 movie could be?
Oh, Zaki has me feeling less cynical. If J.J. Abrams really wanted to do it, I have no doubt that people would, fold themselves in half to do what J.J. Abrams wants.
Yeah.
But I still don't think it's happening. I think it's let's keep these investors happy.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of deal.
Yeah. Very well. Cicero, how
I respect the hell out of Zaki. But listen, California made a lot of things legal. Hey, bruh. I have zero confidence. Zero confidence. Again, like, here's J.J. Abrams can work wonders. Like, he can really, I think, even if he got those guys on to work for scale, there is zero chance that they're going to be able to make a film and release it in 24 months. No way. Right? Because they don't have a script, right? Like, here's the thing. Chris, while I think Zaki has made a very, very cogent argument about J.J. Abrams being able to make a successful film for less than $300 million, there's no way that Paramount is going to let him make a Star Trek film for less than $300 million, right? Because this is the problem. Paramount wants Star Trek to be at worst their version of Spider-Man, right? At worst. At best, they want it to be their version of Star Wars or the MCU films, right? They want it to be their tentpole, their Godzilla, to be the thing that they can look, and hoist up and say, we also have a thing too, just like you guys. And because of that, they're going to want something big and grandiose and ostentatious. And you can't do that in 24 months if you've got nothing.
Well,
today.
Hold on, folks. Let me, I did a little digging. Justin Lin signed on for Star Trek Beyond in December of 2014.
Okay.
So they had a year and a half, and they had to go from zero from when he signed, because they threw everything out. So it's not impossible.
Okay. All right.
And I thought that movie turned out pretty well. Just saying.
There you go. Justin Lin, shout out to that dude.
Yeah.
Because he's doing great work. If you guys haven't seen Warrior, I know this is a Star Trek podcast, but go to HBO Go and check out Warrior. You'll thank me later.
Oh wow! I will check that.
Yeah. So that being said, you have yet again proven your point, Zaki. I'm still not buying it. No way. Not gonna happen. Not going to happen.
Well, we'll have to get
So.
together again on June 9th, 2023 and see if we have our tickets for this movie.
It'll be our next episode.
Well, we'll get together. Look, I said we were going to get to some news. We've run out of time this time, unfortunately, but there is a lot of other news to talk about. I think we still have to get Zaki's perspective on the return of Q that we know is coming. Zaki, we'll save that for another time.
Okay. Fair enough.
Because I'm sure you've got thoughts. There's a couple of other things that have come out regarding the future of Michelle Yeoh in Star Trek. Zachary Quinto has said a couple of things that are interesting, as has Anson Mount, which we alluded to a little bit, but he said some more things. But there's a lot of movement in this franchise right now, and we have heard that you would like our perspectives on this, and it's certainly not a want of not having gotten together, but we'll get together again soon. Since we don't have an episode to talk about, and we got to give Zaki time to actually see the rest of season 3 of Discovery before we review that season. But hey, look.
That's the first time you've called him out, Chris.
That's like, well, no, he said it earlier on the show, but no, it's fine. Look, we'll get to that in all due time. I think we're all motivated to stick together to talk Trek because we have a good time doing it and we all love it. So really appreciate everybody taking the time tonight to get together and talk. And Zaki, it's good to have you back, and we'll try and get together again very, very soon. But that is going to do it for episode number 58 of Discovery Debrief. We hope you enjoyed the show. And if you did, please like and follow us on our social media channels. And if you'd be so kind, we'd also appreciate it if you were to review for the show on Apple Podcasts or Facebook. It only takes a minute, and we'll be happy to read your review on the air when it's posted. If you have any questions, you can follow the show on Twitter at DSC Debrief, where you can also find all of our individual Twitter handles. And feel free to send us questions through Twitter, our Facebook like page, or by emailing us at hailingfrequencies@discoverydebrief.com. Please be sure to set your courses for this feed for future episodes, and be sure to join us next time as we discuss all the goings-on in the final frontier. As always, though, until we meet again, please go boldly, my friends.